Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Leicester City's search for a new manager. It looks like it's down to two, but which one of these fine two gentlemen is it going to be? A lot of talking points, but before we get started, let's say hello to first, the Commander-in-Chief. It's Locks, the Director of Football over here at Blue Tinted Glasses. How are you doing today?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Well, with Steve Cooper gone, how can you not be excited? And you know what? I told you I'm even more excited because I really didn't want David Moyes. We've dodged that bullet. And I feel like whoever we're going to get now, I can only be excited, regardless of who it is. But we've also got another special transfer. It's our equivalent of Buonanotte. We've brought on some talent on loan just for tonight. Hopefully, he'll save us a bit longer. Sandreas, aka LCFC Duck, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, mate. I'm doing good. For once, I'm very much looking forward to the game on the weekend, So it's slowly but surely brewing towards the weekend, and I'm very excited.
Wow, it's good. So it's funny to see who everyone is talking about. Let's just say, look at some of the comments. Sup, Akiv, good to see you. Evening, Kunal. Chester, how are we? Disappointed in the news that we're looking at Carsley, but it could be fake news. I can tell you that I think we here at Blue Tinted Glasses have heard that it will not be Carsley. And who do we think it is? I think we all think it's going to be Rudy. Let's have a look. But you tell you what, let's still talk about it while it's still fresh in our minds. We don't know which one it is. These are the two that it seems to be between right now. There was a comment in Marca, wasn't there, the Spanish paper yesterday, that they had be willing to pay the release clause for Corberan. Ruud is the one that's quickly getting on the hype train. This is what we're thinking. So we're going to take a look at both of them right now, a little bit about how they play and how we think it will affect Leicester. So let's talk about it. Of course, until either of these two actually rock up at the King Power, we won't know. But let's try and see what we can deduce from, when they play. So first up, it's the man that rocks a turtleneck better even than Steve Jobs. It's Ruud van Nistelrooy. Full spoilers, if Ruud van Nistelrooy arrives as the new Leicester manager, you will see me wearing a turtleneck and the blue tinted glasses on our next match day live. That is a promise, and you do know me, I will stick to my promises. So some people might want him in just for that alone, but luckily I think Ruud is actually a really good manager. Now what I want to talk about, what I think is interesting, so firstly I've got to give a big shout out to Ragsy, because we were saying this, Luxy, that Ragsy, he was the guy that was like the hipster, the trendsetter. He was going, I want Van Nistelrooy. I've been saying it since the summer. He was really good, and I thought he was just trying to be cool. But I've got to give him his dues, Ragsy. He'd actually done his research. And there's a few reasons why I think Ruud van Nistelrooy would be a good appointment. But just here, I've got to say, Locks is in on the turtleneck gang as well. So I've heard. He better be, is all I can say. Otherwise, there might be a falling out here at Blue Tinted Glasses Central. So I'm going to look at a few of the games that both PSV played and Manchester United played, and why I think he could actually be a very good appointment. And I've got to say why I came round to it. So firstly, Van Nistelrooy, when he was at PSV, he won the cup and he won it with them against Ajax. Now, of course, in Holland, it's kind of interesting because at the moment, it's actually got a lot more even than it has been recently. In years gone by, it just used to be dominated by Ajax. But in recent seasons, it's actually trading places quite a bit. PSV, Feyenoord, where Arne Slot did really well, and Ajax have actually fallen off a bit. But at the time, it was pretty competitive. So he did very well. But what was really impressive about this result is that in the January transfer window, PSV lost two of their best players. They lost Cody Gakpo and they lost Noni Madueke, both in the same window. That's pretty brutal. That would be the equivalent of losing Fatawu and Mavadidi in the same window. So they both went, and he went with this lineup. So he did have Xavi Simons, who, to be honest with you, is a pretty gangster player. I'm a big fan of his. Really great finish against England, of course, in the Euros. But this was his team. And actually, just to show you sort of how many unknowns, they haven't even got a player profile from Arlio, who's one of their centre-backs. And this actually wasn't Philip Max. It was Patrick Van Aanholt, who used to play for Crystal Palace. But now that he plays for Galatasaray, you can't even find him on lineup builder. But just pretend that is him. So they line up in a 4-2-3-1. But what happens is that when they're in possession, he did this, which you might have seen. This is actually what Maresca did to us on the weekend and what Steve Cooper tried to do but did badly. So I guess what I want to bring out here is that, like, some of us are not necessarily the biggest fan of the kind of fullback becoming a winger solution. But Van Nistelrooy has actually shown that when he did it, he actually got it to work. So I think that's a good start. But I'm going to show you something else. But yeah, here, this is what he did. So in this case, Philip Max moved up to be a left winger. Xavi Simons is a really good player, but isn't really a winger, could then drift inside. They had Gus Till as the kind of other box crasher. So basically, Van Nistelrooy, he knows about having like a 3-2 build-up shape. good in possession. You know, Dutch teams are all about that. They're very technical, very fluid. And he got this system. And yeah, he ended up winning a trophy as well, probably with the weaker team for PSV. So he's won trophies. He plays pretty modern football. He's able to play pretty modern systems. These are all good wins. And none of these things, I think you could say, apply to our previous manager, Steve Cooper. So for me, it's already a W. But then what I also wanted to show, and I think this is the one when I saw this game that I actually really got excited for. So here they are in the league, and they actually beat Ajax in the league too. Just want to shout out Wolfie here from Forest Fan TV with Sangare. Yeah, great player. He got the most out of him. And I think that's important because I think we have players in our squad that are quite similar in profile to Sangare. Not necessarily in Dida. I actually think Sumare might be closer, maybe Wings to some extent too. But in this game, again, he's gone for his 4-2-3-1. You can see at this point in time, to be fair, they did have Cody Gakpo. So a good advantage to have probably the best player in Holland at the time on your team. But what happened in this game is that when they went into possession, oh, yeah, I might recognize this system. This is Enzo ball. So in this particular game, Philip Max actually inverted into midfield to play next to Sangare, and Gutierrez moved up, and he actually ended up scoring. And Veerman was playing here as well. And here they had this sort of 3-2-5 attack shape. So what we're saying here, we're saying we've got someone, firstly, who as a player has got pedigree. I think even if you're Jamie Vardy, even though you stole his goal scoring record in consecutive games, if Van Nistelrooy is your manager, you're going to be paying attention, right? A truly world-class striker, one of the best we've seen in the Premier League as your manager. A player who played at Man United, a player that played at Real Madrid, played at some of the biggest clubs in the world. So he's already got that authority about him. He looks damn sharp in a turtleneck. But on top of that, it seems like he does have a good tactical understanding and plays a modern system. So for me, that's actually very impressive. So the fact that I see that he's actually able to change his system, be flexible and change his system based on it is very good. There is actually a good video you can check out on the coach's voice about Ruud van Nistelrooy. It's really worth listening to. And I think the reason why it's worth listening to is actually understanding why he made these changes. And he was saying how, for example, against Ajax, they changed their marking system. So he had to change something else up about it. Basically, he's saying a lot of the things that you'd expect a competent Premier League manager to do. I think a fair point here, actually, Akif's just brought up here, is it hinges a lot on the fullback. So January could see a wing back getting added to our squad. Also, Top said he's willing to invest heavily to keep us up. Because I know what you're saying is that with our limited options, we might not be able to play football like this. But you see, the thing is even if we have limited options, that is actually why I think Van Nistelrooy is still a great option. Because he took over at Manchester United and he went unbeaten. And that Manchester United team wasn't particularly special. And you could even argue they didn't do anything particularly special against us. But they were unbeaten. And he made a few changes. And I think what Van Nistelrooy did here, which was really good, is he was pragmatic. He didn't try and play some sort of fancy build with three shape. He kept what they were good at, transition. But he noticed an obvious weakness and he fixed it. And what was that obvious weakness? This was the obvious weakness. In many games, the way that Manchester United were playing is that when they got caught upfield, they had Casemiro left by himself in midfield, too slow, not the player that he was 5 or 6 years ago, and they were getting exploited and exposed, and they were losing many games. So what is the most obvious thing you can do? It's super boring, but it's put another CDM next to your other one to make yourself a bit more stable. So you put in Ugarte and Casemiro together, and what happened? Well, they ended up spanking a certain team called Leicester. But here's just to show you. So here was the problem beforehand that you could see too often. Man United were caught with this 2 men at the back, here on transition. You might have seen something similar to this. It's called Steve Cooper in charge of Leicester, when you would probably see James Justin way upfield like this and too many people at the back and getting exposed. And there's too big a gap between the defence and the midfield. Here you can see against Leicester, though, and you see that what the difference is. Now you've got two people in here, so the gaps aren't nearly as big. So they've got more coverage. Now, in this case, there was still a bit of a threat, but you can see that they had better coverage overall. And of course, this game, they ended up spanking us by 5 in. And there you go. You've got Ugarte then playing next to Casemiro. So very simple things that they were doing, but it was working. He also tried to... Now, this is where I think he probably would want to go back to his system that he was playing. So what was happening with Manchester United? They weren't the most creative because a lot of their midfielders weren't the best on the ball. And, that's just a big thing that they're struggling with at the moment anyway. You'll probably see that with Ruben Amorim as well. I don't know if any of you saw the game against Ipswich, but honestly, Ipswich should have beat them. It was quite embarrassing for Manchester United, I would say. So it's something he's got to work on. So again, he sort of tried to add the players, but I would say, look, to be fair, they just kind of kept going long. They kept trying to be direct, but we can see again that that's rather than try and do anything fancy against us, they were like, let's just look for the ball in behind, which they did. Let's use fast attacking wingers and try and hit people and transition and a counter attack. So I guess what I'm saying with Van Nistelrooy is I think from what I've seen is, look, to be honest with you, I don't know what his higher potential is. That I think is an interesting question. And I'd love to see what chat thinks and what the rest of our panel here think today. But I would say overall that Van Nistelrooy, he's shown that he can play progressive football. He's shown that he's got a good understanding of the sort of fluid and modern systems. And he's also shown that he isn't adverse to do something fairly basic that will fix obvious problems that need to be addressed now. I think you add all of that, plus the fact that he's got the authority, that he's a very good looking, handsome man, and he's a name. And I think there's a lot to like about that package, especially if in January you need to sign players. Who would you rather sign for? Would you rather sign for Carlos Corberan or Ruud van Nistelrooy? There we go. Well, when we get to Carlos Corberan, I will say that just say I am a big fan of his, so we're certainly not going to throw shade on him. But before we get onto Carlos, so let me ask you, the panel, what do you think about Ruud van Nistelrooy? Let's start with you, Lux.
Well, I mean, bring him in, mate. Bring him in. I think, look, there are differences, of course there are, and this is a thing that we need to kind of get. We need to understand now as Leicester fans. We need to come to terms with. We are not ever going to have Enzo Maresca at this football club again. And Ruud van Nistelrooy, if it was him to come in, which we believe it is, then it's not going to be a repeat of last season. However, one thing that is clear from all of the reports, all of the news reports and the leaks that have come out from the football club recently, the players want a tactician. They want a philosophy to work towards, all of them together. And it is without a doubt that Ruud van Nistelrooy will bring this to the football club 100%. So I'll hand over to Andreas there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I agree with much of what is being said, right? I think in particular, building up with three at the back, obviously, as you said, Cooper tried to do that as well, but he had flaws in the way he wanted to do that, right? Leaving the right back exposed when James Justin was pushing up. And from how you're describing it, especially the adaptability that I mentioned as well when we were watching, when we were discussing the Chelsea game, right? Seeing Enzo Maresca tweaking his system, to me, was a sign of a manager, who understands when you can't just keep doing what you've been doing. And I think that in particular, the fact that he's able to adapt and be a big pragmatic as well, especially in the short term, right? Because we need these points coming up against Brentford or up against West Ham. We would like to get something on the board. So even if immediately he doesn't force us to play exactly like he would dream of, he's able to come in and fix these issues, the glaring issues that we currently have. And then also slowly but surely implement a style that, from how you're describing it, is obviously not Enzo ball, but it is along the route, and something that, from the belief that I have in the squad, is something that they could utilize better and get more use out of. In particular, I'm thinking with the two DMs, whereas you mentioned United, right? Two very lack of creativity in the defensive midfielder department. I think with Winks as a deep line playmaker, there is certainly a good option there if you could back him up with another DM like Ndidi or Skips for more physicality.
Absolutely. Good question here from Alex Ostek. With his brief games at Manchester United, he's playing two CDMs of Casemiro and Ugarte. Do you think we should do this? It's possible. I mean, I would say if I was the manager coming into Leicester right now, I think the most important thing is how to stop us conceding so many goals, and not just conceding goals, but actually giving away so many shots. Obviously, things like Wout Fass, giving away an absolutely, ridiculous goal. There's not much you can do as a manager other than, to be honest with you, tell that player off and put him in his place. I do wonder, some of these sort of people that have had falling outs of Steve Cooper, do you think Yannick Vestergaard's going to have a go at Ruud van Nistelrooy if he tells him you're not in his team? He might do, but I think he'll be a brave guy in terms of doing it. So that's a good question. And yeah, you're right. He's got philosophy. What I will say though, okay, so I've focused a lot on the positives, and just I would be very excited with the Van Nistelrooy appointment. I think it's an exciting one in some ways because there's a little bit of unknown there. But I think, to be fair, there is also a bit of a risk because, he's still unproven. Like, what I will say with his PSV team is I think he was entirely right to sort of fall out with his board. But the next season, they actually did win the title, and they won the title under their new manager, Peter Den Bosch. And they obviously did make a lot of signings, but basically a lot of the Dutch press were like, well, maybe Ruud was actually underperforming with his PSV squad because, you know, they were nowhere near as good. And actually one of the big changes that the new manager made is they played like a higher line and they were being a bit more attacking, I would say. So that's something to learn from. But, you know, you can't, that's sort of like saying what would have happened if Nigel Pearson stayed during a title winning season. Would we have won the title? Would we have not? You know, you can't really look too much into these things, right? You got to compare different people to different things. That's number one. And I think the other one is just that, you know, I haven't seen enough games of him to sort of really say how far we could possibly get with him. You know what I mean? Like, what's his higher ceiling? I actually think, funny enough, it'd be interesting again. I'll ask both you, Andreas, and Locks what you think. But what though if we end up with a manager who is good, but isn't quite as good as Maresca? Because weirdly enough, that could actually be a good thing. Because like, if you really get like an incredible manager, he'll only be with you one season. It's almost like what you want is like the Goldilocks zone. You want a manager who's really good, but not elite? Or am I just being stupid in that?
I think a bit of what you're talking about being elite, right? Enzo came in while we were in the championship, and there were so many questions about his, you know, capability as well, right? Coming in off a disappointing time at Parma, and yes, he had been the assistant to Pep, but he quite clearly proved that he, at the very least, tactically, even though there were some bumps along the road, was absolutely brilliant. He was an elite level coach, and he then had the task this season of trying to stay up with a point deduction, and he had some issues with John Ruckin and Susan Whelan, which, you know, is no surprise, but I think, let's just say, Ruud van Nistelrooy does have an elite ceiling, and he's getting the backing needed from top, and maybe he gets those changes in the boardroom. Well, all of a sudden, he has a lot of say at this club. He has a project where he can, you know, see European competition potentially be played at the King Power again, or maybe even competing for top four, because at this point in the Premier League, while, yes, the top six is very established, we are seeing teams be able to break this mold like we did back in the past, getting Europa League. Aston Villa, Newcastle, right? Obviously, Newcastle had massive funding, and Aston Villa have invested heavily as well, but your likes of Brighton, there are more teams competing for these European spots. So Ruud van Nistelrooy, if he believes and, you know, does well with top, and we have great facilities, I think the manager is able to stay. Obviously, then if a Manchester United or whatever opens up, there is a chance that he could, you know, fancy them instead of us. And I don't think there's any shame in that. But I will say we are way more likely to keep an elite manager for longer than just one season now that we're in the Premier League, if they keep us up.
I'd agree with Andreas there. I think. Neil, did you say you? Oh, sorry, Andreas. You said he does have an elite ceiling. I'm interested to see if Neil agrees with that or not. I mean, look, to answer your question, Neil, I think Enzo Maresca is a better manager than Ruud van Nistelrooy. Obviously, we don't know that 100% because we haven't seen enough of him. But just off the basis that Enzo got us promoted first time of trying, and now he's managing Chelsea and doing a good job at it, I think we can safely say he is the better manager than Ruud van Nistelrooy. But again, it does come down to ceiling. It is the unknown. It stinks of a top signing. It does smell of a top signing, and they are the rumors we heard this morning from certain people on Fox's Talk and things like that Top was going to lead this recruitment, and TalkSport confirmed that as well. So if Ruud van Nistelrooy is the guy to come in, then yeah, I mean, I think it is a top signing.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, it's going back to the old King Power days when they really like to have like a big name manager, which I think is good. There's nothing wrong with that. To answer your question, you said, do I think Ruud van Nistelrooy is elite? I would say I don't know. I literally don't know. I don't know what his ceiling is right now. It could be. What I will say with Maresca is I didn't know too much about him either. But after I literally saw 2 games of him pre-season, you can ask Luke, but I was saying this guy's amazing. This guy, I think, is going to end up at one of the top clubs in Europe. And that's quite a statement to say after 2 games. But I was saying what he's trying to do with a championship team takes balls. And not only that, but he was literally pulling it off in the first game. And then we played Liverpool. Yeah, we got beat 4-0. But in the first 20 minutes, we actually should have been 2-0 up. And I was thinking, if he can make Casey McAteer look like this, then this is crazy, right? This guy's going to go places. And he has done. So there you go. But, and here's the interesting thing, right? Even though then I think we're all expecting Ruud, I think everyone will be really happy with him. I do know Kate the Great will be a especially big fan of Ruud van Nistelrooy coming in. I can't wait to put my turtleneck on. I will say that. But if for somehow it fell through the cracks, I will say that I think there is one other manager that I think also has an elite ceiling. And that manager is the other person that we've been linked to, which is Carlos Corberan, King Carlos. Now, why am I saying that? That's quite a big statement. And I think the big reason I would say that is that last season, there were a few teams that beat us. In fact, Michael Carrick at Middlesbrough did the double over us, but they were jammy, right? They did deserve their wins. I'm not going to lie, but one of those games they scored. Yeah, an outrageous free kick, etc., etc. The other one, to be fair, we were awful. They deserved the win. But in my opinion, there was one manager last season that completely won the tactical battle in both games and yet walked away with a grand total of 0 points. Wah, wah. And that was Carlos Corberan. But if this was like a boxing match, this would one of these where like the judges would be saying this is rigged. We want the rematch. This is a scandal of epic proportions because he out-tacticked Enzo. And I think over the entire course of the season, he was the only manager that did it. And he did it with a squad that, as we'll show at the end, actually had a grand total of 0 budget overall spent on it, which is crazy. So for that reason, I'm going to keep going through with King Carlos. And look, I don't know. Just to put it out there, would the players take to him? Don't know. Would he be able to handle the Premier League right away? Don't know. I think there are a lot of unknowns with Carlos Corberan too. But I think that there's a lot about him that is exciting. So here you've got some shots of us playing actually against us. So you can see his West Brom team. And you can see, for example, here they were pressing us up the pitch. They managed to force Hermansen to kick it here. You might remember this actually. And they always ended up scoring off this. So they were disrupting our build-up. Basically, he had done his research and he knew how to make it difficult for us. Another thing that I want to compare here as well, and this is important for the sort of team that we are. I've said that right now we're conceding a lot of goals. And one thing that always strikes me about Carlos Corberan and his teams is they do not concede many goals. And one of the reasons they don't concede many goals is, look at this. If you're trying to coach a 4-4-2, this is like insane. This is such a compact block that basically you can't get through here. So it means that you as the opposition, you've got to go around it or find another thing. But the thing is his 4-4-2 will shift all over the place. So the thing is, what I will say actually, this really reminds me of when Claudio Ranieri was in charge of Leicester. Actually, the 4-4-2 block that Ranieri had, especially in this latter half of the season, was honestly amazing. It was so good. And it's no wonder why what happens is teams go, okay, well, we're just going to have to go wide and knock in the crosses. And then Robert Hoof was just like, thank you very much. I'll deal with these all day long. It worked really well. It forced teams to play in a way that suited our style. And so Corberan is very good at doing that. So with a team that concedes a lot of goals, I think Corberan would come in and clean that defense up very quickly. You can see I've got some of his attacking patterns of play here. So again, you'll see that, look, when they get the ball, what are they doing? They're moving into a bit of a 3-2-5 shape here. But here's a bit different. That actually, this is quite similar. So you've got the full back moving on. So again, another one that sometimes goes for that shape, but not always. You can see here, this is against us, that knowing the sort of pressing structure, pressing the 4-4-2, that he instructed his centre-backs to move out here. So they've got more of a passing angle. But actually what would happen here is then one of the CDMs would drop in while the other one would drop out. So they're trying to create some extra space, getting overloads. They're pinging the ball around here. This is going to generate some space and they can play up. You can also see here's another one of their attacking patterns of play. So they'll have that one of the box crashers moves out to the wing while someone moves in to drag out. So you can see again, what I really like about him is he's got like a clear structure. He's got clear patterns of play, a lot of excitement. And I think so basically, when I saw Corberan's team play, what I was observing, I thought, was a manager who really knows what he's doing and he's getting a lot out of his team, but his team's letting him down. And that's not often you can say that the case, right? So, for example, if you looked at Manchester United with Eric Ten Hag, you're thinking, how is a team that costs £900 million so rubbish? That's honestly what you're thinking, right? Whereas with some other teams, like to be fair, you've got hand Nuno at Nottingham Forest, a lot of credit this season. He's made at one point a team that wasn't that good look a lot better than they were, right? Beating Liverpool away and things like that. So, just to wrap up on Corberan, here's his team for this season, and you can see that their spend is 4.7 million on average. And of that, 3.5 was for Mikey Johnston, who they got for, here we go. In fact, this was mentioned last, Mikey Johnston should have had the hat-trick at the King Power, not going to lie. You might remember Hamza Chowdhury basically being a one-man defensive unit to stop it there. Basically, with no money and loan signings, they were top earlier. They're doing all right. And this was last season. Look at that. Some spent, 0. Free transfer, loan. One of these loan signings, which was Sarmiento, even he lost in January and Ipswich snuck him instead. And yet, despite that, he got to the playoff semi-finals and he had a decent effort of it. So I think if you're talking about someone that does deserve a chance in the Premier League, can somehow make things happen with not many resources, Corberan is your man. Of course, again, a massive risk.
Yeah.
But that's why for me, I feel that like, regardless of the two that come in, I think it's definitely looking up. And I feel that no matter who we appoint, deploy the blue tinted glasses.
Hey, I mean, and let's be fair, both are a risk, yeah. In their own ways, both are a big risk, because that is why I think a lot of people were from the start swaying towards Potter and Moyes, because they are the safest options, I think, out of all the names that have been linked. But Andreas, I don't know about you, mate. Both of them have carry a big risk.
Yeah, I mean, both are very risky, right? But I think we went for the safe option in summer. The guy who took his hand up, the guy who had experience keeping a Nottingham Forest in the Premier League when they had a very weird squad with 30 new signings, and he made it work, right? So we went for the safe option then. That quite clearly didn't work. I think we need to go bold. I'm happy to go bold. I want to see this bravery, just like we saw in the summer when we had a crucial rebuilding season ahead of us, where we had to get promoted the first time of asking, otherwise we'd be in serious financial trouble. So back then, I would say Enzo Maresca was even more risky than any of these two appointments are. I think Carlos Corberan, I vividly remember both games we played against them because I remember them being so tight. And I remember all the good words Enzo said about Carlos Corberan afterwards as well, that this was a really tight tactical battle. And to then think, the squad that we had compared to what they had at West Brom, it's night and day, really, right? So I think Carlos Corberan is someone who I really rate highly. And I think in terms of what I remember hearing about, I think I heard a more Mark O'Brien podcast he was on. I can't remember what show, but he was discussing the difference between these two managers. And he did mention for both of them, one of the key things were they were obsessed with football, right? They lived and breathed the game every night, every day, every single minute they were awake. Their mind was consumed by football. And I think if you want someone or a sign about an elite ceiling, right, it's someone who's more than obsessed with their craft and really taking it to the pinnacle of what they can do. And I think Corberan is more that type, but I'm very happy if we get either of these. Obviously, it's leaning very heavily towards Ruud van Nistelrooy, and I am certainly more than pleased. It can only go up from here. But Carlos Corberan would have been my preferred choice, to be honest.
And Anil, the circumstances for Van Nistelrooy or Corberan, whoever it is, they're much more difficult than Enzo, because Enzo came in, and again, it was an exciting signing, like either of these two will be. However, let's not beat around the bush. He had a Premier League squad in the Championship. It was made a lot easier for him, Anil.
For sure. But I think I might disagree a little bit, though. I mean, I still think Enzo did absolutely amazing. What I remember saying last season is that whoever came in, actually, the most important time of their entire tenure might be the first 20 minutes they meet the team. And I actually thought the same about Steve Cooper. And I wouldn't be surprised if even on the first day, he lost them. I think it's so important that you've got to make an impression. You've got to get them on board. You've got to excite them and give them an idea. And, let's say you go up there for your first presentation. You're like, all right, boys, my name's Steve, and this is how we're going to play. And I don't know, it's just some notes written on the back of a fag packet or something like that. And he doesn't really understand it, right? It'll be interesting to see. Whereas, I think Van Nistelrooy walks in, it's the same thing. I think the players, regardless, imagine that you have been told that information. You're going to be thinking, wow, Van Nistelrooy is going to be our manager. That's pretty good. He's just completely exposed you in 2 games as well. I mean, regardless. I mean, the thing I will say about both of them, though, is that given that they're coming in mid-season, is how much time they'll have to prepare and to get an idea. Because that is, to be honest with you, that's another reason why Steve Cooper did such a bad job. Because coming in pre-season, you've got so much time to look at your squad. So to underperform with that team is so awful. But I feel that I feel like Corberan might have a better idea, because obviously he'd have done his homework on us last season and came up with a good idea to how to beat us. But fair play, Van Nistelrooy beat us convincingly in 2 games. So he clearly hasn't just lucked his way into that. I would also say that during that spell, Ruud van Nistelrooy, they drew with Chelsea, and they actually a bit unlucky maybe not to win that game. So
I really wanted to add to that point, actually, because that was the game I was thinking, right? Because one thing is beating a Leicester City managed by Steve Cooper, who looked absolutely headless. But the 2 main takeaways I took from watching Ruud van Nistelrooy at United was, first of all, obviously United has a squad that needs to deliver pretty much a victory every week, depending on, yes, against City or whatever. You can say a draw is fine, but they want to win every game they play, realistically speaking, right? That's Manchester United. But he very quickly tightened up their issues, made them look more solid, and they started winning games. Yes, a few of them was against us. But I watched that Chelsea game, And as you say, that was a very, very back and forth game. And this is a Chelsea that has been schooled in the Maresca system now for 4 months, if you count pre-season, right? And I think a very, very good Chelsea side, in my opinion. So for Van Nistelrooy to that quickly be able to, first of all, turn the tides of a United squad that was, battling for relegation. I don't want to say that United would never get relegated with the squad that they have, but they were laying, very close to Leicester in the standings. And then to play a very, very even game against who we believe is an elite manager in Enzo Maresca and a very talented and a good squad that was on a roll in Chelsea. I think that was the key point for me, actually. I was really impressed with that draw. And to me, that's it. I wouldn't be mad seeing Ruud in this rare, because before that, I will say I did have my doubts, but after that game, I wouldn't be mad at having him.
Yeah. I just want to bring something up here, because I knew it would come up from Wolfie. He goes, just remember Cooper beat Corberan in the playoff finals, just saying, which is fair enough. That is a best of one game. I'd be curious for you though, Wolfie. Even though he was your manager, who do you think is the better coach? Do you think it's Steve Cooper or Carlos Corberan? Because, just because you win one game, like you see it in the Champions League a lot. Like, do you remember the season that Chelsea won the Champions League? I don't think they were the best team in it. They're getting outplayed by Bayern Munich for like 80 minutes. But fair enough, they still won the trophy. Even last season, Real Madrid won it, but they were really lucky to get past Manchester City. So, sometimes in these best of one games, England got to the European Championship finals. They should have probably lost to, was it Slovakia or Slovenia or someone earlier in the round. So, sometimes these things can happen. He goes, Carlos, no question. But then again, I think Chappie would do a better job than Cooper. Hey, let's throw no shade on Chappie. I think underrated manager there. But yeah, let's just kind of like ask and wrap it up in chat. So I think we are all expecting Ruud van Nistelrooy. The most important things are what chants are we going to sing for him? And who are we going to bring in? But actually, let's say whoever manager comes in, what do you think are the biggest problems that they need to address right away? Maybe I'll start with you, Andreas.
Oh, go on, sorry, Andreas. No, Andreas.
Yeah. No, you're putting me on the spot here. I was thinking of there are so many things that I would like to see that to prioritize them. I think the first one would obviously, but this is what I would say is a given if Ruud van Nistelrooy steps into the camp, right? The team our players have just been spanked by him twice in both the cup and the league. He is a big name. Clearly, the respect would already be there, right? I think he needs to come in and then immediately get us ready for Saturday. Don't start implementing every single minute detail in your tactic, but do what he did with United, right? Fix the glaring issues, or at the very least, remove them as much as possible in 3-4 days and get that ready for Saturday, because I would love a point away at Brentford. I wouldn't expect anything. I wouldn't expect more. I would be happy with a point. 3 would be phenomenal, but that's the first step. And then slowly but surely start integrating the tactic week by week, because that's a key thing for me. I want to see improvement when I watch the game every Saturday. I want to see us at the very least do something better. Yes, every now and then, obviously, there's going to be ups and downs, but I want to see the philosophy. I want to see the progression. And that is really what I lacked on the Cooper.
Yeah. I'll pass this to you, Doug. I mean, this is a fair point. This is something that Imran's hinted at a few times. He says, you can play any system you wish, but we have 2 main ingredients that you lack as a Premier League team. We have shit defenders and we have no leaders. And I think there's a fair to say both of these things are true, but I'll put that to you, Lux. What do you think?
Imran is not an old person, but he is old enough to know that even the shittest of defenses in football can be helped by a manager coming in and organising them. So that's what I would say to Imran. I'm not expecting wonders. I'm not expecting us to keep clean sheets every week, but I am expecting us to leak less goals, and I think that will happen. Hopefully, off the back of that, we will score more as well, or at least have more chances, because that has been an issue. But I think he will improve the defense 100%. But he is right. The defenders are not. The defenders are the weakest part of our team. But again, they'll be organised under Ruud.
I will say, right, this is my thing, and I don't know what happened. Obviously, we had a very solid defense last year, and I do believe that we have a top quality goalkeeper, which is obviously important. We've seen that already benefit us massively. But there is so much about our defense being shot. And I will say they've played absolutely horrendously in the past 3-4 games. But they aren't that bad. I refuse to believe it. Belfast consistently playing for Belgium. And I see him every now and before Belgium drop beautiful games. When Vestergaard heads to the Danish cap, he's the first name on the team sheet in the defense recently. And he's been playing very good there. He did have a bit of a shaky game against Spain, I will say that. But he's been great there. Because Janssen, isn't that like these players aren't that bad as we're making them out to be? I don't know if it's tactical. I don't know if they're just all in bad shape. I thought the first game O'Coley had against Aston Villa, I saw the promise in him there, but he's been shocking since then. I don't know if they're all just this deep in a pool of self-pity or whatever it is, But I believe wholeheartedly that they aren't bad defenders. They are Premier League quality defenders we have. They just haven't shown it in the past 5 games. They've been shambolic and all over the shop. And I don't know how much is on their mental state being bad, how much of that is on Cooper's tactic. I'm not saying here we have top quality defense in the league, by no means. But we have defenders who are Premier League quality. And I mean that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Where's Big Wes when you need his damn leadership? And I'm going to vote for Sean James for manager. It's very simple, guys. We're all stupid. Just score more, concede less. That's all we got to do. That's all Ruud's got to do when he turns on, just with a sexy Dutch accent and go, guys, just score more goals, concede less. And that's it. That's a terrible Dutch accent, by the way.
It's quite good. That was quite good. It was quite good, yeah.
We'll look to have it up. Well, look, I tell you what, guys, we can keep going, but I think we can probably call it there. I think there's going to be many more twists in the tail. But look, I'm still really buzzing. We've got rid of a nightmare. I'm feeling positive. If I have one of these two, let's maybe just end it on this then. We'll start with the bad stuff first. What's the worst possible news you could wake up to tomorrow? Locks.
Lee Carsley is leading the race to become Leicester City manager.
Fair enough. Haven't watched any England game with him, so I have no clue. But I will say
sideways.
Aside from that, I will say a Mads Hermansen injury would be horrific. We would still have to take Danny Ward in that. That would be, I mean, then Danny even Ward if our defense gets tightened up and they only concede 1 shot a game, likely chance they're scoring.
That's yeah. What about you, Anil? What's the worst news you could wake up till tomorrow?
Steve Cooper reappointed.
You're in dreamland, mate.
Backs down. That would be the worst thing. And then let's go with the opposite. Let's on the happy bit. What's the best news we could wake up with? So who do you really want? Hand on heart, who do you want? Let's start with you, Andreas. What manager do you want in?
It's really tight. I will say though, long term, I would rather have Corberan than Ruud and Nistelrooy.
And locks.
Mate, they've been my top 2. I'm going to go for Ruud. And the reason I'm going to go for Ruud, and I didn't tell Anil I was going to say this on the stream, but I'm going to say it. Blue tinted glasses can confirm that Ruud van Nistelrooy was at Seagrave today. He was at Seagrave today.
It's happening. I mean, that's great news regardless, right? I might be more for Corberan, but I'm thinking it's 60-40 in my heart. I think short term as well, the guy who's to improve us most in the shortest time, I would say that was Ruud van Nistelrooy. And I mean, I'm just excited to hopefully be playing some good football again, right? Something that could give us hope, something that could give us belief. And as has been said multiple times on multiple streams, the important thing for us as supporters now is to fully get behind the squad, because we're not going to have a third manager. So even if you don't like the tactics, shut up and just cheer your heart out. You know, we need to be behind them as well. We need to.
And let me say, Anil, before you wrap up, yeah, he was at Seagrave today, and of course, of course, when it is announced, Blue Tinted Glasses will be live to react. The latest I am aware of Leicester City ever announcing a manager was Dean Smith on the 10th of April 2023, and that was at 10:30 p.m. So it could be tonight. It could be tomorrow. It could be Thursday. But
I'll be sleeping like this with my phone ready for the blue tinted phone call, prepared to put in an extra shift.
I'm confident, but of course, in football and we know nothing is ever guaranteed. So let's just wait for the official confirmation.
No worries. What a bombshell to drop that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Dropping that last one is crazy.
Locks better than Fabrizio Romano. There you go, guys. So Ruud van Nistelrooy is going to be the next Leicester City manager. Let's all get on board the Flying Dutchman. Rude awakening for everyone else in the Premier League. Thank you very much. That's been Blue Tinted Glasses, and we will see you when Ruud is officially announced. Bye-bye.